problem is that the federal government enshrined discrimination in that process and therefore kept minorities out of the suburban housing boom. So they could have done things a different way, and so if they had, it would have been better, but that product actually worked and made sense. It just didn't make as much money for financial institutions because you have to wait 30 years to make all your money. Yeah.
Hi, Professor Crump. Because you mentioned that foreclosures affect rental tenants as well, sometimes very unexpectedly, I was wondering if you are familiar with the, newly proposed legislation by HUD called Petra that proposes to convert funding for rental assistance programs and public housing into a mix of public and private ownership. And if you are familiar with it, what is your...
I've just heard rumors about it, so I haven't, yeah. I'm still keeping up with robo-signers. But I will say in Minnesota we have been passing legislation. We passed legislation requiring that landlords notify tenants if they're in foreclosure. Tenants would get forms or actual notification, but even the attorneys admitted no one could understand what was on this form. So we have better notification, and we also are allowing tenants to, if they want to stay, to pay the lights and water and stuff too. So we have tried to address the investor issue somewhat, yeah. But it's a hard one, yeah. And I understand at one point the Cook County Sheriff was refusing to evict people because he felt they were being evicted illegally or inhumanely, yeah.
Would you speak on reverse mortgages, please?
I'd like to, but that's really beyond what I understand, yeah. I know what they are, but I know there's some controversy about it, but I don't know enough to really comment on it.
I'm always interested to compare the United States with the rest of the world, like Western Europe, for example, which evidently didn't have a housing mortgage crisis. And why is that? What's the difference?
Canada's an interesting one to compare us to because there is no mortgage crisis in Canada. There is no mortgage interest rate tax deduction in Canada either. Yet the percentage of homeowner-occupied housing is the same in Canada as it is here. Canada has regulations against that sort of mortgage operations. But there are housing booms and busts, maybe even worse than ours in other parts of the world. Spain, Ireland had an unbelievable run-up in housing prices and a huge crash. Iceland, the Bank of Iceland invested heavily in mortgage-backed securities that all went bust, more than the entire worth of the country or something like that. And I noticed there's massive demonstrations in Iceland last week against the cost of this financial disaster. So it is global in nature. And one of the challenges of this is a lot of this occurs in our local neighborhoods, and those of us who work in communities are kind of locally rooted, but then we're kind of working all separately, and we're trying to bridge up to the national level or the international level somehow, and that's a challenge for us to do. But yeah, the Irish property boom and bust bears some looking into. Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Is that a mortgage problem?
I think so, yeah.
This may seem to be two almost contradictory issues, but when you sell a house or buy a house, you pay the price of comparables, which may be 5 miles away, which may not have anything to do with your property, which of course raises your real estate taxes. Now, on the other hand, if sales are made when the property values are depressed, your real estate taxes go up. What gives?
Well, there's a couple issues there. One is the issue of appraisal. So when you make an offer on a house and then you want to get a loan, you got to hire an appraiser to come in and look at comparables. And you saw my chart where the mortgage amount on this one property increased by 136%. That means also that someone was appraising that property of that value. But the bottom line with appraising is, you know what the offer price is on that house. If you come in with an appraisal below that, you effectively kill the deal. So no appraiser ever comes up with anything below the buyer's price. That's to say the appraisal process is flawed. And they passed a law in California to try to regulate the appraisal process, and honest appraising, no one could, the houses were not worth what people were paying for them in an honest appraisal process. Now, and I've looked at houses in Twin Cities where sellers were asking $390, but when I go to the county's website, the county appraised it at $280. And you should see the real estate agent when you tell them that. But counties and government, they don't want prices to go down. Because what happens is that as prices go down, their tax base is being eroded. So therefore, what they're having to do in some cases, and I don't, is to increase the actual percentage rate at what they tax, right? So if all these houses in your county are going belly up and in foreclosure and they're not generating any property tax, or if the state government is in deficit, which most state governments are, and cutting aid to local governments, then local government has to raise property taxes. But believe me, if the county says something's worth something, they're not happy about having to revise those values down because they know that's costing them money. Yeah. That house sold for $325, by the way, making the people instantly underwater. Yeah.
Any last questions?